Hello and welcome to the Bonsai Garden, and today I'd like to start by telling you a little story about this particular tree, which is a decapitated Japanese maple. And I bought this tree in April 2019 in the Lake District, where we were attending a relative's wedding. And I bought this from a large garden centre, and this tree, when I bought it, it had a sort of goblet shape. So it had a single trunk which came up to a crown, which split into about 6 different branches. And as I say, it looked like a goblet, which wasn't a good shape for a tree. It was likely to develop inverse taper. It was early days in my bonsai career, and I took a leap of faith and removed all but one of those to create the new leader for the tree. And I placed that into a pond basket and left it to develop. And it was coming along quite nicely. Then a couple of years in, we developed the garden and we built what we refer to as the Japanese tea house, which is in fact a corner arbor which we bought from B&Q, and we did that up to look like a Japanese building with the colouring and some enhancements on it. And whilst I was developing and building that, a huge plank of wood fell and decapitated the tree that I had growing in a basket. Unfortunately, that left me with only 2 unsightly branches growing out of the trunk at right angles to each other and on a horizontal plane. So it had totally ruined the work that I'd done in trying to develop the tree. So what I did was I took that tree and I tried to ground layer it, and that's when it went into this large pot. So the main trunk as it was is actually running off to the side here, and what I'm trying to do is develop roots at the point where the branch was coming off the side of the tree. And so this has been in this pot now since spring of 2022. So it's been in here a year, and it's time to take this out of the pot and take a look. I have a horrible feeling it may not have worked, but we'll find out once we get into the pot. Air layering is a technique whereby we try to take a branch or a part of a tree and we get it to put out new roots at a specific point. And the idea is then that that particular part of the tree, once it has developed a root base, can be separated from the parent tree and becomes an independent tree. It's a great way of propagating trees and giving yourself a new plant that's faithful to the parent plant. It's not always successful, and sometimes it can be a frustratingly slow process, but it can also result in great successes. Ground layering is a similar technique, but it tends to happen lower on the tree, and what you're trying to do is, with the existing tree, develop or move the root plane typically further up the tree so that you have a shorter trunk. In some cases, people will grow the plant through a tile or perhaps even a CD, and as the tree swells, that cuts off the cambium layer and causes for roots to start growing at that particular point, and eventually the lower portion of the tree can be separated. Here's a close-up of the tree in the pot. Initially I had tried to put a tourniquet of wire around the trunk at this point just here, and although I've got branches developing below that, unfortunately I don't think it was buried deep enough in the soil to be effective. So what I'm hoping for is that at some point along the trunk, which is further down, that it has put out roots. And as I say, I suspect that might not be the case, and that the root ball is quite a lot lower down in the pot at the end of what was this major branch. So let's get into the pot and have a look. So I need to tease the tree out of the pot if I can. And you can see there is some limited success in that it has started developing roots out of the side there, which is kind of what I was wanting. Whether or not that is sufficient root to support the plant, I doubt that at the moment. So I think perhaps what I can do to try and promote these roots to grow more vigorously, perhaps I can ring bark the tree here as though I were performing an air layer, but that portion will be beneath the soil. And also, if I trim off some of the roots further down, that will force these roots to grow more significantly. So that's what I'm going to do. So the first job is to reduce down the initial root ball so the tree is dependent less on that and puts more emphasis on developing these new roots further up. So what I'm hoping to do is over time reduce this lower root ball, increase the higher root ball, and then eventually I can remove this whole part and the tree will be planted, and that will become the initial tree, and then I can think about shaping that. So what will likely happen is that, having removed some of this root, I will let it develop on for another year in a deep pot to develop those roots, and then eventually separate the plant at that point, and it will live entirely off those roots in the higher plane there. So that's the root ball significantly reduced. So what I now need to do is just pop a little tourniquet on the plant just below where these existing roots are, just to strangle the cambium layer, and that will effectively act as though I were air layering the tree at that point. And it will prevent all the good stuff going down from the tree into these roots, and it will be forced into the root plane higher up. So let's trim off some of this to make it easier to work with. And now I just need to tighten this bit of wire to the point where it's cutting into the bark, and I can see that it is doing that there. And you can see that's biting in at that point, which is exactly what we want. We're wanting to damage the cambium layer at that point, and hopefully it will put out the roots above where the wire is, and all the energy of the tree will go into these upper roots and to forming new roots at that point, rather than going further down the tree. So that now needs to go back into the pot, and it will be left to develop for another 12 months. And the mistake I made before was to not bury it deep enough. So I need to make sure that when I put it back in, that it is sufficiently deep in the pot. And that point where those new roots are is well covered. So that's the tree back in the pot, buried quite deeply, and it will sit in there for the next 12 months to try and develop those new roots. And hopefully this time next year I can separate off the lower portion of the tree, and the tree will live independently on those higher roots. This is the tree that I refer to as my Hornbeam Stumpy, and it was developed from a tree that was initially about 7 foot tall, and I cut that back quite severely to try and develop a short tree with nice taper. And when I initially saw the base of the tree, I could see that it had this sort of flaring point here, and assumed that that would be the point at which I could develop the roots and a nice nabari. Unfortunately, what happened was, when I dug down into the soil, I found that that was a false nabari, if you like. And in fact, the tree extended down and looked quite boring for another several inches beneath the soil. And I thought that this again was another great candidate for doing ground layering on, to try and bring the root base further up to where I initially thought it would be. So again, I planted this into a deep pot. I put a tourniquet around the base of the tree to try and starve the root base further down and form roots higher up. Again, I'm not entirely convinced how successful I've been here and whether that was buried deep enough in the pot, but let's get to it and have a look and see how we've done. Again, I need to get into the pot and see what's happening. So, remove the moss and just put the tree on its side and try and get at this soil. And I just need to tease the soil away around the area where I'm hoping to have developed roots. And just in here is the tourniquet, and I haven't developed roots above that, which is a little bit of a disappointment. So this, at this point, is the root plane where I had hoped to develop roots. So let's see what we've got then further down. So there are some initial roots just forming there. But I think that substantially this tree is still living on the roots that are much further down. So I have got some feathery feeder roots around the trunk. And you can see that there's quite a lot of feathery roots on that side there. And these are what I want to encourage. So I'd like a root base. Well, ideally I would like a root base a little bit further up. So I think what I may need to do is actually take off the bottom portion of the roots on this plant. As with the Japanese maple, if I remove the lower roots, then that will encourage the roots higher up to grow and develop. And again, unfortunately, I think this is a tree which is going to be in this pot for a little while longer. Maybe it would benefit from being in an air pot or a pond basket. So, because it has got feeder roots higher up, what I may just do is take a saw and cut through the tree at that point. I think there is still a bit of trunk at this point and some roots beneath that. Let's cut away this lower portion of roots and see what we've got. So actually the trunk doesn't descend quite as far into the soil as I thought, and we have got quite a nice mat of root, albeit perhaps not at the point on the trunk where I had hooked. Right, so new plan is to get this into a pond basket to develop the roots that are on there. And to hopefully encourage these roots which are coming out of the trunk a little bit further up. And I may try popping another tourniquet on there. Give that 12 months and then have a look at it again this time next year. But that might not be a terrible result. At least it has started putting out roots further up. I'm just going to take off a larger root we've got growing in there. We have got plenty of feed roots there. And that's the root that I've taken off. I'm weighing up the benefits of which type of pond basket or aerated basket to grow this tree in. And this is a typical pond basket that people would grow bonsai in to help aerate and develop the roots. I swear by these larger baskets for growing my Japanese maples because they provide more room for the roots. They're often shallower than a pond basket, but they're also a lot wider, which allows for the lateral spread of the roots. So I'm just going to put a tourniquet of wire on there. In fact, I may not need that. I may just let where it's bitten into the bark, I might let that grow out. And I think these feeder roots, as they develop, will thicken up. So I think I would probably just pop that straight into the basket as it is. So I'm going to pop it into this larger basket. So I just need to prepare that with some tie down wires. So as with any bonsai pot or basket, I'm just putting some tie down wires to secure the tree into the pot. And I'm just going to reuse the soil that was planted into. And set the tree into that. So I'm just securing the tree into the pot to make sure it doesn't move around too much. Just pull and twist. Tauten that up. Just trying to avoid catching these roots. And then I'm just covering all of those roots over with soil. And that tree now I can just pop into a corner somewhere and just leave it to settle in there. And hopefully the roots will develop over the next 12 months. So I hope you found that useful or interesting. If so, please hit the like button and consider subscribing to be notified of future videos. Thanks very much for watching, and hope to catch you in the next one. I'd just like to finish with a special thank you to Aaron and to Levi. Thank you for your support.